All right there, everyone. I'm going to do this video on introducing phrasal verbs. I'll do a few more on the complexities of separating them and not separating them with tons of examples. But in this video, I'm just going to introduce the grammar of phrasal verbs. But I also want to say that even though we're focusing on grammar in this video, phrasal verbs are really helpful if you're trying to improve your fluency in speaking. And that's because phrasal verbs are, it's like learning new vocabulary because they're verbs, they're new words, but knowing how to use them and being able to understand what people are saying when they use them is going to help you with your speaking. In fact, some people call phrasal verbs idioms. And I would agree. Idiomatic speech, colloquial speech, I don't want to say informal, but I guess you could call it informal. I use phrasal verbs all the time. They're very common and very useful, but they do have more formal definitions that you can use instead of a phrasal verb, which I would recommend using like in an academic essay. So first, let me talk to you about what all this is. Okay, so phrasal verbs are verbs plus something else that are inside of a phrase. So what's a phrase? A phrase is just a group of words, okay? But inside of a phrasal verb, the group of words happens to be a verb, which is an action in this case. Actions like eat, go, run, lift, give, okay? And then a particle. Okay, what's a particle? A particle is like a little piece of something. And we're calling it a particle because it looks like a preposition, but it's technically not because it doesn't act like a preposition. Let me give you an example of a phrasal verb. So we can say eat out. If you eat out, that means you go to a restaurant to eat. You don't eat in your house, you eat out. Okay? Now, if you just use the verb eat by itself, that just means to, consume some food, right? If you put out by itself, out just means not on the in part of some place. So outside, inside. But when we combine them together, the meaning becomes something totally new, something different from saying just to eat, and something different from saying like I'm outside. When you put them together, you get a completely new word. So you can say, tonight, I'm going to eat out with my friends. And that means I'm going to go to a restaurant, okay? You could also say, tonight, I'm having dinner. I'm going to have dinner with my friends at a restaurant. You could be that explicit, but you could also use a phrasal verb. So that's what a phrasal verb is. It's a group of words that contains a verb and a particle, looks like a preposition, words like in, on, out, things like that, but it's not a preposition because it doesn't act like a preposition. All right, so let me give you an overview, a little bit more information, and then in some other videos, I'll give you a lot more details. When you're trying to learn phrasal verbs, I think you need some tips, okay? This is really going to help you save time and study more effectively. So the first tip I want to give you for learning phrasal verbs is make sure you know which verbs are transitive and which are intransitive. Okay, what does that mean? What does transitive mean? Okay, and now I always tell my students, don't worry, you don't have to know this word transitive, but you need to know what it means so that you can effectively study. Here's your strategy. Transitive just means that the verb has an object after it. There is an object after the verb. okay? So like, for example, the verb give, okay? I can't just say, I need to give and stop talking. Doesn't make sense. I need to have something after that word. So I can say, I need to give you my food. My food, here, my food is a noun. It is a thing. And it comes after a verb, okay? We also have actually you. So that's another example of an object. Okay, so objects, sorry, I'm getting confused. I might be confusing you, that's what I mean, is that I have two things that are coming after this verb. Give, and then you, and then my food, okay? Now, the thing I need to give to you is the food, my food. That's a noun, a person, place, thing, or idea, and it's coming after the verb. When things, nouns, come after verbs, they are called objects, okay? So some verbs can take and need an object, okay? So let me give you another example. I will call you. Okay, here in this example, I'm saying call. I could say I will call, period, or I will call you. If I say I will call you, you is the object. It is the noun, or here it's a pronoun. It could be a noun or a pronoun. Pronouns replace nouns. They're just replacements for nouns. And you can use this after a verb also. Long story short, it's an object. It is a thing that comes after a verb. And when you have something that comes after a verb, it's an object. And what I'm trying to say is that there are some verbs in English that are transitive, which means that those things, those verbs, require an object, whereas other verbs do not require an object, okay? So for example, let me show you. I sleep every day. I sleep every day. Okay, I hope we all do. Sleep. Sleep is a verb that does not take an object. You can't put an object after sleep. What are you gonna say? I sleep myself? No, we can't do that. We can say every day. We can say how often or for how long, but that's not an object. This is telling us how often. This is telling us the time. This is an adverb, not an object. When you do not have an object after a verb, and you can't have an object after a verb, it's intransitive. That means no object can come after the verb. Okay, now, why am I telling you all of this? Doesn't this make it more confusing? Yes, it probably does right now, but it will help eventually, because when you study phrasal verbs, you will learn that some of them can be separated and some of them cannot be, and they have to stay together. And I will explain those in some other videos, but the summary of that is that when you know whether a verb is transitive or intransitive, you have a shortcut of knowing which verbs you can separate and which verbs have to stay together. Sort of. There's still a lot of tricky things about it, but let me give you an example. Okay, let's see. I need to look up some words in the dictionary later on. Okay, here's my sentence. I need to look up. Look up is the phrasal verb. Here's the verb. Up is the particle. What does it mean to look up? Look up means to just check the dictionary for a word and check the definition or check whatever you want to find. Now, this verb does have an object after it. You see some words. That is a noun. And so therefore, that is an object. That is an object that is coming after the phrasal verb, look up. So therefore, this phrasal verb is a transitive phrasal verb because it takes an object, okay? Now, because it has an object, I can do certain things with it. I can say, I need to look up some words, or I need to look some words up, okay? I can even change the object into a pronoun and say, I need to look them up. And I'm going to talk about this more in another video. But you see we have the phrasal verb here, and it's not separated by this object. It is not separated. The object is coming after it. Over here we have some and up separated by the object. That means I have separated this phrasal verb. Guess what? They have the same meaning. And guess what? They're both very common. You can use them both. I would say they are both equally as common to use either form. And then over here we have look up, and we have the word them. What does them mean? Well, them is just a pronoun. You can turn nouns into pronouns. Words is plural. It's third person. So the words, them. Okay? So I'm just using a pronoun here. But because I'm using a pronoun here, I actually cannot use it after. I'm not allowed to say, I need to look up them. That's actually not grammatical, and I'll talk about that in another video. That doesn't work, okay? When we turn an object that comes after a phrasal verb into a pronoun, we can't actually leave it at the end. We have to separate the phrasal verb. Okay, so this is an overview of how complex phrasal verbs are, but I've given you a strategy, which is to look for whether a phrasal verb is transitive or not. Why? Again, because if a verb is transitive, then you can usually, not always, you can usually separate the phrasal verb with the object, okay? Transitive means there's an object after the verb. But this is not always the case, okay? And if you have a phrasal verb that is intransitive, which means there's no object, then you would never separate it by adding a noun or pronoun, object between it, okay? So I'll give you an example of that, okay, of a phrasal verb that we cannot separate, okay? And that is, let's see. Okay, I'm going to use the example I had earlier. I am going to eat out tonight. Okay, I'm going to eat out tonight. Tonight, okay, well, eat out is the phrasal verb. Tonight is a time. It's not a noun. It's not an object. So this verb eat out is an intransitive phrasal verb. Intransitive. So there's no object. So I could never put a noun in here, okay? Of course, unless I'm talking about something else. And phrasal verbs have lots of different meanings, okay? So be careful with what you're saying. But I hope that tip helps you out. Another thing I want to say about phrasal verbs is that phrasal verbs can sometimes be 3 words long, okay? Some phrasal verbs are 3 words long, and the last word is usually a preposition. So, okay, you can say that you can look out. That means to check for something, but you can also look out for, and that means to look and check for a person. Or you might say, look out, be careful of something, be aware, or I'm going to look out for you, I'm going to check for you. Or for example, you can say, let's get through something, that means to finish, but you can also say, let's get through with this, okay? Or here's one example, drop out, you can drop out, period, That means to leave something, to quit something. But if you say drop out of, same meaning, but now you are able to add objects after them. So the reason why we add these prepositions sometimes with phrasal verbs is because they are intransitive and we want to be able to add an object to them. So here now we can. He dropped out. He dropped out. He quit. But if we want to be more specific, we can say he dropped out of school. Okay. Now here in the first one, we just have the phrasal verb. It is intransitive. We cannot put a noun there. He dropped out school. Nope, we can't do that. That's not correct. It's intransitive. But as soon as we add a preposition, then it's okay because prepositions always have nouns after them. Now it's okay to say where. All right. I recommend that you watch the next videos that I'm going to show on how to separate and not separate phrasal verbs. Bye.